Before supermarkets and central heating, poor British families survived winter with meals made from scraps, bones, and pure ingenuity. Today we are looking at 25 cheap winter dishes Brits relied on during hard times. Simple, clever, and long forgotten. Let us dive into the meals that kept our ancestors warm when money could not. Number 25. Suet crust poverty pie. In the hardest winters, when cupboards rattled with nothing but flour, onions, and a scraped clean jar of dripping, families turned to what they called poverty pie. It was less a recipe and more an act of determination. Your grandmother would take a bowl of flour and rub in suet with her fingertips until the mixture felt like cold sand. A splash of water brought it together into a soft, heavy dough that promised bulk more than flavor. The filling depended entirely on what the family had managed to save. A few onions, softened in dripping, leftover carrots, yesterday's potatoes, even a spoonful of cabbage or a heel of cheese. Layered into a chipped enamel dish and sealed beneath the suet crust, it baked into something far greater than the ingredients suggested. The crust steamed inside and browned outside, turning the meager filling into a comforting winter meal. Poverty pie was not a treat. It was survival disguised as supper, warming cold hands and colder evenings. Souse, pickled pig's feet. Souse was the kind of dish that appeared in the poorest households during bitter winters, when nothing from the animal could be wasted, not even the feet. Your grandmother would simmer pig's trotters slowly until the meat softened and the kitchen filled with the unmistakable scent of pork and broth. Once tender, the trotters were lifted into a crock and covered with a sharp mixture of vinegar, peppercorns, bay leaves, and onions. Over hours, the heat of the kitchen coaxed the flavors together, transforming tough cuts into something tangy, gelatinous, and oddly satisfying. Eaten cold with bread, mustard, or pickled cabbage, souse delivered protein and calories when families needed them most. It was cheap, filling, and long-lasting. Three things that mattered more than luxury. While the idea may wrinkle noses today, for generations it was a beloved winter standby, reminding families that thrift and tradition often outweighed squeamishness in the struggle to stay fed. Number 23. Potato and Marmite soup. When winter winds rattled thin windows and wages stretched dangerously thin, poor families made a pot of potato and Marmite soup, a dish built on the barest minimum. Potatoes, cheap and dependable, were chopped into chunks and simmered until they surrendered into the boiling water. A single spoonful of Marmite, precious and used sparingly, turned the pale broth a deep brown and perfumed it with the unmistakable savory aroma that filled kitchens from London to Lancashire. Some families added an onion for depth, others a handful of oats to thicken the pot. But most relied solely on potatoes and that tiny dab of Marmite to create something that felt like a hug in a bowl. The saltiness revived tired bodies after long, freezing workdays, and the warmth clung to the ribs better than tea alone could manage. It was simple. Yes, but in homes where winter arrived with hunger, this soup represented ingenuity, comfort, and survival. Number 22. Welsh flummery, oat jelly. Flummery was one of those quiet, frugal dishes that carried centuries of Welsh tradition. In poor households, especially during winter scarcity, oats were a lifeline, the cheapest grain and endlessly versatile. To make flummery, a grandmother would soak coarse oatmeal in water for several days, stirring occasionally as the liquid thickened into something between a broth and a paste. Then came the straining, a slow, patient pressing to extract every last drop of the milky oat liquor. This was boiled gently until it transformed into a pale, softly trembling jelly. Once cooled, it set into a wobbly pudding that could be sliced or scooped. Served with a drizzle of milk, treacle, or even nothing at all, it offered steady energy and quiet comfort. Children loved its strange, bouncy texture. Adults valued its reliability. Today, flummery feels almost forgotten, but it once filled winter nights with a sweetness born not from luxury, but from resourcefulness and care. Bacon bone broth. Poor British families knew how to draw every ounce of nourishment from the cheapest ingredients, and nothing proved that better than bacon bone broth. A bone, stripped nearly bare by the butcher, might cost only pennies, or even be given away. Into the pot it went, along with barley, lentils, or whatever dried pulses were on hand. As it simmered through the long winter afternoon, the bone released its last treasures, a whisper of smoke, a hint of salt, a trace of fat. The broth thickened into something hearty enough to quiet growling stomachs. Potatoes or carrots were added if the family had them, turning the meal into a proper soup. Even children who frowned at the sight of the bare bone would sigh with relief at the first warming spoonful. Bacon bone broth wasn't glamorous, but it was a dependable friend during winters marked by rationing, joblessness, or low wages, when every drop of flavor mattered. In many poor households, nothing was ever truly wasted, not even a suet pudding that failed to rise or that accidentally tore apart during steaming. Instead of throwing it away, thrifty cooks turned it into scrambled suet pudding, a surprisingly comforting winter breakfast. Crumbled into pieces and tossed into a pan with a bit of dripping or lard, the pudding transformed under heat into crisp-edged golden morsels that tasted faintly of flour, fat, and whatever dried fruit had been folded into the original mixture. Sometimes sugar was sprinkled over the pan, sometimes a spoonful of jam was added once it hit the plate. Children adored it. To them, it felt like the closest thing to a treat in a season of scarcity. Adults appreciated its filling heft, the way it warmed you from the inside out before facing another cold day. Scrambled suet pudding was a testament to the ingenuity of households who refused to let even failure go to waste. Lard toast. Before butter became affordable for most families, and long before margarine crowded supermarket shelves, poor British households relied on lard toast, a simple, salty winter breakfast that kept hunger at bay. Your grandmother would spread a thin layer of lard over slices of stale bread, sometimes mixing in a pinch of salt or scraping the browned bits from the bottom of the roasting tin for extra flavor. Once toasted under the grill or over an open fire, the lard melted into the bread, turning it crisp at the edges and soft in the center. On the coldest mornings, children held the warm slices between their hands like mittens. It was not glamorous food, but it was warm, practical, and reliable during rationing and economic hardship. Today it is nearly vanished, but for those who lived through lean winters, lard toast still carries the memory of making do and making comfort from almost nothing. Carrot jam sandwiches. Wartime ingenuity produced many surprising recipes, but perhaps none more beloved or more unlikely than carrot jam. Sugar was rationed, fruit was scarce, and families needed something to spread on bread that felt like a treat. Carrots, cheap and abundant, became the unexpected hero. Grated finely and simmered with lemon zest, a little sugar, and sometimes a hint of ginger, they transformed into a glossy, sweet marmalade substitute. Spread onto thinly sliced rationed bread, carrot jam sandwiches brightened drab winter days with their cheerful color and gentle flavor. Children often had no idea they were eating vegetables, and adults appreciated that something so humble could taste so festive. These sandwiches were economical, nourishing, and surprisingly delicious. Though few people make carrot jam today, it once symbolized the cleverness and resilience needed to survive times when even sweetness required creativity and thrift. 17. Black peas, also called parched peas, were a winter ritual in the northern counties, especially Lancashire. Cheap, filling, and rich in protein, these dark maple peas were soaked overnight, then simmered slowly until they softened and split. Vendors sold them hot at fairs, markets, and winter gatherings, scooped into paper cones that warmed frozen hands. At home, poor families served them in bowls with salt and vinegar, the sharp tang cutting through the peas' earthy flavor. They were especially treasured during cold snaps, when fresh vegetables were scarce and money was tight. Black peas provided a simple, sustaining comfort that did not require meat or expensive ingredients. Although still seen in small pockets today, particularly around bonfire night, most modern kitchens have forgotten them entirely. Yet for those who grew up with their steamy aroma, black peas remain a symbol of northern resilience and winter warmth. Section 16. Gleaned vegetable broth. Gleaning, the quiet, humble practice of collecting bruised, discarded, or unsold vegetables at the end of market day, was once a lifeline for poor families in winter. Your grandmother might have returned home with a bag of wilted greens, a soft carrot, a misshapen turnip, and perhaps a leek that had seen better days. Into the pot they all went, chopped and simmered with water, salt, and perhaps a single bone kept frozen and reused for weeks. As the broth bubbled, the house filled with the gentle scent of vegetables giving their last bit of goodness. The resulting soup was never the same twice. It changed with whatever the market had rejected. Yet it fed families through harsh weather and lean wages, teaching children that nourishment could be coaxed from what others overlooked. Today, gleaned vegetable broth has nearly vanished, but it carries the memory of communities surviving through resourcefulness, frugality, and quiet dignity. 15. Bread fish cakes. In the toughest winters, when real fish was far beyond the family budget, cooks invented bread fish cakes, a creative attempt to bring flavor to otherwise empty plates. Stale bread was soaked in hot water, squeezed dry, and mashed together with leftover potatoes to form a heavy dough-like mixture. The secret was the fish bone, boiled to extract every last hint of aroma, then stirred through the mixture to mimic the scent and faint savoriness of fish. Shaped into patties and fried in dripping, the cakes crisped on the outside while staying soft and comforting inside. Children, hungry and hopeful, often believed they were eating actual fish cakes. Adults knew better but appreciated the warmth and bulk they offered. Bread fish cakes were the definition of making do, stretching imagination and ingredients as far as they could go in winters when money ran thin and meals demanded creativity. Sheep's head broth was the kind of winter meal that spoke of both hardship and determination. When money grew tight and butcher shops offered little more than the parts no one else wanted, a sheep's head, stripped of most meat but still full of hidden nourishment, became a lifeline. Your grandmother would bring it home wrapped in thick paper, set it into the largest pot she owned, and cover it with water, onions, barley, and a scattering of root vegetables if she had any to spare. As it simmered slowly through the afternoon, the kitchen filled with a savory warmth that felt richer than the ingredients themselves. The broth turned silky and deeply flavored, drawing every ounce of goodness from bone and sinew. Children might have turned away from the sight of the skull, but the moment that first steaming bowl landed on the table, all hesitation faded. Sheep's head broth was not a luxury. It was survival disguised as comfort, shared spoonful by spoonful in the bleakest months. 13. Toasted oat herring roe. During the leanest British winters, when real herring roe was far too costly for poor families, resourceful cooks created a humble imitation that warmed both stomach and spirit. Toasted oat herring roe began with oats, cheap, dependable, and always available in the larder. Your grandmother would toast them in a dry pan until golden, their nutty scent filling the small kitchen. Then came finely chopped onions and a pinch of salt. The mixture stirred gently until it resembled the crumbly texture of real fish roe. Spread thickly on a piece of hot, butterless toast, or stirred into potatoes, it brought a savory richness to meals that otherwise lacked protein. Children often believed it was genuine fish, their imaginations fueled by hunger and hope. Adults knew the truth, but appreciated its frugal brilliance. This improvised roe is rarely seen today, but for generations it stood as proof that even the simplest ingredients could pretend to be something grand. 12. Potato scrap pie. Potato scrap pie was not just food, it was the embodiment of wartime thrift and post-depression resilience. Nothing was wasted in poor households, not even potato peelings or watery mash left cooling in a pot. Your grandmother would gather every last scrap, the browned drippings from the roasting tin, the ends of carrots, the bits of cabbage too tired for the main meal. Mixed together and tucked under a crust made from flour and water, these leftovers transformed into a pie, humble in appearance but surprisingly comforting. As it baked, the crust crisped, and the filling melded into a savory, steaming mixture that tasted far richer than the ingredients suggested. Potato scrap pie filled hungry bellies on long winter nights when rationing stretched thin and payday sat too far away. It may sound desperate today, but for many families it was a small triumph, a warm, nourishing dish conjured from almost nothing, proof that a good cook could create comfort even in scarcity. 11. Faggots and gravy, offal balls. Before factory-made versions lined freezer aisles, faggots and gravy were a cherished winter staple in poor British homes. Made from whatever pork offcuts the butcher could spare. Liver, heart, belly trimmings. Your grandmother minced everything finely with stale bread, onions, and herbs to stretch the mixture further. Shaped into firm balls and wrapped in caul fat, if available, they roasted slowly until browned and fragrant. The juices at the bottom of the pan, mixed with a little flour and water, became a rich, savory gravy poured generously over the dish. Served with mashed potatoes or cabbage, faggots offered intense flavor and satisfying warmth on bitter evenings. They were proof that nothing needed to be wasted, that every part of the animal had purpose. Today, most people only encounter them in mass-produced form, but the homemade version, dense, rustic, and deeply rooted in working-class tradition, was once the very definition of winter comfort for families scraping by. If you're enjoying this look back at Britain's forgotten winter meals, hit like and subscribe. There are plenty more surprising dishes still to come. 10. Boiled cabbage stalks. In the coldest months, when vegetables were expensive and ration books ran low, poor families often relied on the parts we throw away today. Boiled cabbage stalks, thick, fibrous, and humble, became an unlikely winter side dish. Your grandmother would slice them thinly, saving the tender inner stalks that remained after the leaves had been used in soups or stews. Boiled until soft and translucent, they were served with a splash of malt vinegar or a spoonful of dripping to add flavor. Though simple, the dish filled hungry stomachs and provided a hint of freshness when greens were scarce. Children sometimes groaned at the sight, but once the vinegar hit the plate and steam rose into the cold kitchen air, even they could appreciate its warmth. Boiled cabbage stalks may seem austere now, but during rationing and hardship, they were nourishment, proof that every part of the vegetable mattered when winter tightened its grip. 9. Potted meat from Sunday leftovers. Nothing stretched as far as homemade potted meat. After the Sunday roast, often the only meat meal of the week, Your grandmother would gather every remaining scrap. The crisped edges, the small shreds left on bones, even the congealed juices at the bottom of the tin. Mixed with rendered fat, salt, pepper, and sometimes a hint of mustard, these remnants were minced or mashed until smooth and packed into small jars. Once chilled, the fat formed a protective seal that preserved the mixture for days. Spread onto bread, toast, or oatcakes, potted meat became a savory treat that carried families through the long, hungry stretch between pay packets. In winter, when cold winds seeped through thin walls and heating was a luxury, it felt especially comforting. Today's versions come neatly packaged in tins, but the homemade kind, rough, rich, and made with pride, was once a symbol of thriftiness and ingenuity in working-class British kitchens. Oatmeal rissoles were born from necessity, not luxury, a clever winter dish that allowed poor families to enjoy something resembling a meat patty without the cost of meat. Oats were cheap, filling, and endlessly adaptable, so your grandmother would mix them with finely chopped onions, herbs, and just enough beef dripping to give the illusion of richness. The mixture rested until the oats absorbed moisture and became thick enough to shape into patties. Fried until golden, they developed a crisp exterior and a soft, savory interior that paired beautifully with gravy or stewed vegetables. Children often imagined they were eating real meat, and adults welcomed their hearty warmth after long days of labor or rationing queues. Oatmeal rissoles rarely grace modern plates, but once they were a backbone of winter survival, proof that with a little creativity, even the simplest ingredients could become comfort food on a budget. Haddock roe on toast. In fishing towns and coastal villages, haddock roe was once a winter breakfast beloved by poor families who relied on the sea for affordable nourishment. Fishmongers often sold roe cheaply or handed it out at the end of the day, knowing it would not keep long. Your grandmother would fry the roe gently in a bit of dripping until firm and lightly browned, its aroma filling the small kitchen with a hint of the harbor. Served on slices of stale bread toasted over the fire, it made a warming, protein-rich start to frosty mornings. The taste was briny, delicate, and far more flavorful than its humble origins suggested. Children who grew up with it remember the simple pleasure of holding hot toast in cold hands while steam fogged the windows. Today, haddock roe is scarcely seen outside specialty shops, but for generations it was a reliable winter staple, deeply tied to Britain's working-class coastal life. Yorkshire pudding as the main meal. Before it became a beloved side dish on Sunday roasts, Yorkshire pudding served a far more practical purpose, feeding large families cheaply during long, hungry winters. Made from little more than flour, eggs, and milk, or watered-down milk when times were especially hard, it puffed into a golden, airy slab that felt deceptively indulgent. Your grandmother would bake the pudding in a well-greased tin, letting the hot fat create crisp edges and a hollow center perfect for filling. Instead of beef, she would pour in whatever gravy she could conjure from bones, scraps, or dripping saved throughout the week. Sometimes onions were added for bulk, sometimes leftover vegetables were tucked inside. Served hot and steaming, it filled plates and bellies with a comforting warmth that carried families through hard nights. Today, Yorkshire pudding rarely stands alone, but once it was the star of the meal, a testament to frugality and northern resilience. Potato and vinegar hot pot was a winter staple for poor families who needed dinners that were both comforting and economical. Potatoes were cheap and filling, and they could be stored through cold months. They formed the heart of this dish. Your grandmother sliced them thickly and layered them in a battered pot with onions and a pinch of salt. Water was poured over just enough to cover the bottom, and the mixture simmered slowly until the potatoes softened and the onions melted into sweetness. The finishing touch was a splash of malt vinegar stirred in moments before serving, giving the dish a tangy brightness that cut through winter heaviness. Sometimes a bone was added for flavor. Sometimes nothing but the vegetables themselves carried the meal. Eaten with crusts of stale bread, this humble hot pot kept families warm when resources ran low. It is rarely made today, but it once represented practicality, comfort, and survival in the bleakest months. When a family was lucky enough to obtain a rabbit, often through trapping rather than purchase, nothing went to waste, not even the pluck, the heart, liver, and kidneys. Rabbit pluck pie was a winter dish born from that principle of thrift. Your grandmother would chop the offal finely, mixing it with onions, herbs, and leftover vegetables, stretching the filling as far as possible. Enclosed beneath a simple crust of flour and water, the pie baked into something unexpectedly rich, its savory aroma filling the home with the promise of warmth. The offal gave the dish a depth of flavor that mimicked far more expensive meats. Served with boiled potatoes or cabbage, it could feed a whole family on the coldest nights. Rabbit pluck pie may sound unthinkable now, but to earlier generations it was both practical and celebratory, a rare moment when winter's scarcity gave way to a full, steaming plate. 3. Rumbleds, pre-cheese version. Before cheese became affordable enough to crown the dish, Rumbleds was a simple Scottish winter staple made from the humblest ingredients: cabbage, potatoes, and onions. Your grandmother would boil the potatoes until soft, fry the onions until sweet, and simmer the cabbage until tender. Then she mixed everything together into a hearty mash that steamed in great mounds on chipped plates. On bitter nights, a spoonful of dripping stirred through gave it a glossy richness that belied its frugal origins. Rumbleds was warm, filling, and dependable, exactly what families needed in drafty cottages with limited heat. It stretched ingredients further than anyone thought possible and kept hunger at bay when wages or rations were thin. Today's cheesy version feels almost luxurious by comparison. The original, though plain, carried generations through long Scottish winters with resilience and simplicity. Stuffed onions might sound fancy today, but for poor British families, they were a clever way to create a winter meal from almost nothing. Large onions were peeled and hollowed carefully, their layers tender from the cold months. The centers were mixed with stale breadcrumbs, herbs, and perhaps a spoonful of dripping if luck allowed. The mixture was packed back into the shells, each onion becoming its own small vessel of warmth. Baked slowly until soft and sweet, the onions transformed into something far richer than their ingredients suggested. Their aroma filled even the chilliest kitchens, offering a hint of comfort in a season dominated by scarcity. Served with potatoes or on their own, stuffed onions were proof that a little creativity and a lot of patience could turn simple ingredients into a winter feast. These days they are almost forgotten, but once they held pride of place on many a working-class table. Tripe and onions was once a defining winter dish in northern Britain, loved by some and loathed by others, and essential for poor families who needed nourishing, inexpensive meals. Tripe, the lining of a cow's stomach, cost only pennies and required long, gentle cooking to transform its chewy texture into something tender. Your grandmother would simmer it with sliced white onions and a splash of milk, letting the flavors meld into a pale, comforting stew that warmed both body and spirit. Sometimes a pinch of pepper or parsley was added, but extravagance was rare. The dish relied on simplicity and slow cooking. Served with mashed potatoes or crusty bread, it filled the house with a mild, distinctive aroma that older generations still remember vividly. Today, tripe has all but vanished from mainstream diets. But for families weathering harsh winters and harder times, it represented nourishment and thrift, and the ability to make a meal from parts others overlooked. Share your memories in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more forgotten foods and British nostalgia.